Over the weekend, an interesting report surfaced from two well-known NFL insiders, Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport. These guys are highly respected in the industry, so when they share something, it's worth paying attention to. In their report, they mentioned that while nothing is certain, there's a real possibility that Micah Parsons and Maxx Crosby might not stay with their current teams. They also suggested that Myles Garrett may not be the only star player on the move this offseason. At first, this idea seemed far-fetched. Why would a team part ways with a top-tier player like Maxx Crosby? But the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. Over the past few months, Crosby himself has hinted at some dissatisfaction, and this report adds to the speculation. Could a trade actually happen? The report pointed out that both the Dallas Cowboys and the Las Vegas Raiders have undergone significant coaching changes. With new coaching staffs and front office shifts, the futures of key players like Parsons and Crosby remain uncertain, especially as major contract extensions loom. In particular, the Raiders are in a rebuilding phase, and if they decide to move on from Crosby, it would be a huge decision. Now, let's be clear, Maxx Crosby isn't the kind of player you trade away for a mid-round draft pick. He is an elite talent, one of the top 3 or 4 pass rushers in the NFL, and arguably the best run defender at his position. If the Raiders were to move him, they'd be looking at a massive return, likely involving multiple first-round picks. From a football standpoint, trading Crosby doesn't seem logical. He plays a premium position, and players of his caliber are extremely hard to find. However, there's another factor to consider: his contract situation. Crosby has brought it up several times, both on his own podcast and in other interviews, suggesting that he wants a new deal. So far, this hasn't turned into a public dispute, and he hasn't demanded a trade or threatened to hold out. But the fact that he keeps bringing it up means it's something to watch closely. Could we really see Maxx Crosby in a different uniform next season? It's not a certainty, but with all the changes happening in Las Vegas, it's definitely a possibility worth keeping an eye on. Right now, Maxx Crosby hasn't officially requested a trade, but that doesn't mean things won't reach that point. While he hasn't threatened to sit out, it wouldn't be shocking if he eventually says, "I'm not playing this season without a new contract." And honestly, he has every right to feel that way. If you take a closer look at Crosby's current contract, there's a lot of flexibility for both sides. The Raiders could technically move on from him today and only take a $10.2 million dead cap hit. That's a surprisingly low number for a player of his caliber, considering that Crosby's contract carries an average annual value of around $28 million. The fact that the team can get out of it so easily puts him in a tough position. As of now, Crosby doesn't have any guaranteed money left in his deal. If the Raiders were to release him, the dead cap hit would come from past voided years, not from any guaranteed future money. That's why Crosby might push for a new deal. He wants security, and he deserves it. While his current contract averages around $23.5 million per year, that's significantly lower than what top pass rushers are earning. For example, Nick Bosa is making around $34 million a year, and if Myles Garrett gets traded, his new team will likely pay him $36 to $37 million per year. Then Micah Parsons will eventually sign a massive extension as well. If the Raiders want to keep Crosby long-term, now is the time to act. Signing him today would likely cost around $31 to $35 million per year, which would still be cheaper than waiting until after Garrett and Parsons get their deals. That's why this report is so intriguing. I never thought there was a real chance Crosby wouldn't be with the Raiders. But when you factor in his public comments about wanting a new contract and the team's new leadership under John Spytek and Pete Carroll, things get interesting. Could the Raiders view Crosby as more valuable in a trade than on their roster? If they believe they can get a major return in draft assets, it's possible they could make that tough decision. While nothing is set in stone, this situation is definitely one to keep an eye on. Even though Maxx Crosby is an elite player, some might argue that the Raiders could find a replacement. Maybe someone like Tyree Wilson could thrive in a new scheme. Perhaps Malcolm Kuntz or Cullivan Chason could step up if given the opportunity. However, I believe moving on from Crosby would be a massive mistake. Truthfully, it would be a bad decision. That being said, I do understand why Crosby wants a new contract, and I also see why insiders like Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero believe there's a real chance he might not be with the Raiders long-term. His contract situation, combined with the changes in leadership, adds uncertainty to his future. When it comes to Micah Parsons, his departure from the Cowboys seems slightly more realistic. The Cowboys have already invested heavily in several key players, including CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and cornerback Trevon Diggs. Other players like Zach Martin, who makes around $18 million per year, and even second-string wide receiver Brandon Cooks are also on sizable contracts. With several safeties and linebackers taking up cap space, it's possible that the Cowboys might decide Parsons is too expensive to keep. For Maxx Crosby, however, trade speculation within the Raiders fan base really took off after another report surfaced, one suggesting that the Tennessee Titans might be open to trading the number first overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Both Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport have reported that, while it's still early in the process, there's a legitimate chance the Titans could move that pick. If the Titans are willing to trade down, it raises an interesting question for the Raiders. Could they try to move up and draft the best quarterback in this class? With their clear need at the position, it's something to consider. However, it all depends on how teams evaluate this year's quarterback prospects. It only takes one team to fall in love with a QB and make a move up the board. Meanwhile, the Titans' general manager has already stated that they are not locked into taking a quarterback with their pick. That means trading the number. One pick remains a real possibility. The big question is, will the Raiders be willing to give up a major asset like Maxx Crosby to make a move for a franchise quarterback? It's a complicated situation, and one that will be worth watching closely as the offseason unfolds. The Titans have made it clear that they plan to take the best player available in the draft. Their general manager even stated publicly that they're targeting the best overall talent, not necessarily a quarterback. While some people believe Cam Ward is the best quarterback in the class, others argue that players like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter are simply better athletes. Even though quarterbacks are more valuable due to their position, those other players may be ranked higher based on overall talent. And honestly, I agree with that perspective. If the Titans truly believe in taking the best player available, but another team is willing to offer multiple first-round picks for that number one selection, it would make sense for Tennessee to trade back. That's why it's interesting that they're at least considering the possibility of moving the pick. From the Raiders' perspective, though, trading for the number, one pick doesn't seem like the best move. A lot of Raiders fans have suggested a trade package that includes Maxx Crosby and the 6th overall pick to move up to number 1. But the problem with that strategy is that it signals an all-in approach. Trading up for a quarterback means you believe you can build a Super Bowl contender within the next 4 or 5 years. However, losing a player like Maxx Crosby, arguably the best player on the team, would make the roster weaker overall. It just doesn't seem like a smart move. Others have proposed trading multiple picks instead, such as this year's first-rounder, next year's first-rounder, 2 second-round picks, and a third-rounder. But again, that feels like giving up too much. If you look at how the Philadelphia Eagles have built their defense, they've found great talent in later rounds. Milton Williams, a third-round pick, had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl. Josh Sweat, a fourth-rounder, had 3 sacks. Jalen Carter, a rookie this year, recorded 1.5 sacks in the Super Bowl and was also a third or fourth-round pick. The point is, teams can find impact players without giving up massive assets. The Raiders should focus on strengthening their offensive and defensive lines through the draft. Instead of overpaying veterans like Adam Butler for $15 million a year, they should invest in young talent, develop their linemen, and build from the trenches. That's the smartest and most sustainable way to improve the team for the long run. The key to building a successful team is consistently replacing talent through the draft. Certain positions like tight ends, wide receivers, cornerbacks, and safeties can be risky if drafted outside the top few prospects. Many of these players struggle to succeed unless they land in the perfect system. For example, a player might thrive under Bill Belichick, but struggle in a different scheme. That's why I firmly believe teams should prioritize drafting offensive and defensive linemen. Unlike skill positions, linemen are much less dependent on scheme fit. If I were the Raiders, I'd focus on drafting linemen in the first 3 rounds. Historically, the best linemen come from the early rounds, and teams that dominate in the trenches tend to win championships. Just look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They've reached 3 Super Bowls and won 2 in the last 7 or 8 years, largely because of their elite offensive and defensive lines. So if I were running the Raiders, I wouldn't trade away draft picks or move on from Maxx Crosby. I'd keep our picks, hold on to Crosby, and use the number 6 pick to take the best available player. Obviously, quarterback is a big need, so if Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is available at number 6 and the team believes in them, you make the pick. If not, You take the best talent on the board, whether that's a wide receiver, a defensive end, or a cornerback, and continue strengthening the roster. The goal is to build up the trenches and create a solid foundation for when the team eventually finds its franchise quarterback. Speaking of quarterbacks, I recently ran a Twitter poll asking Raiders fans what they would prefer if the team doesn't land a rookie QB in this draft. The options were signing Sam Darnold for about $35 million per year on a 3-year deal, a 1-year rental of Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, a bridge quarterback option such as Jacoby Brissett or Justin Fields, while drafting a young quarterback, likely not with the number 1 overall pick. 6th pick. It'll be interesting to see what direction the team takes, but one thing is clear. The Raiders need a long-term plan at quarterback. Whether they draft one this year or wait for the right opportunity, they can't afford to keep passing on the position like they have in recent years. If the Raiders don't draft a quarterback with the 6th overall pick, they could still develop a rookie later while relying on a veteran like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson for a season. Based on a recent poll, most fans prefer this route, and I agree. It seems like the smartest decision for the team. Signing Rodgers or Wilson for a 1-year deal would allow the Raiders to remain competitive while still having the option to draft and develop a young quarterback. The roster is already solid, and if they use the 6th pick on someone like Travis Hunter, especially as a full-time wide receiver, along with adding an offensive guard in the 2nd round, the offense would be in great shape. Imagine an offense featuring Aaron Rodgers, Travis Hunter, a top-tier guard, and DJ Glaze developing at right tackle. The only missing piece would be a running back, but that could be addressed in free agency or the mid-rounds of the draft, similar to how the Buccaneers found Rachaad White in the 3rd round. A well-balanced offense like this, combined with a healthy defense, could push the Raiders into playoff contention. Defensively, if they bring back key players like Jonathan Hankins, Marcus Epps, and Adam Butler, while ensuring Maxx Crosby is taken care of, this team could be dangerous. In fact, the Raiders' defensive line isn't that far off from the Eagles' front. When healthy, they've shown flashes of dominance. Early last season, the D-line, led by Maxx Crosby and Christian Wilkins, was causing havoc for opposing offenses even without all key pieces in place. If they stay healthy and enter 2025 with a full-strength unit, the Raiders could surprise a lot of people. As for the other quarterback options, some fans suggested signing Sam Darnold for $35 million per year. While Darnold showed improvement with the Minnesota Vikings, I don't think he's worth that investment. Spending that kind of money on a quarterback who remains unproven as a consistent winner, especially in a playoff setting, feels like a risky move. The Raiders need a reliable veteran presence, and if they can land someone like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson while developing a young QB, that would be the ideal path forward. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with the idea of signing Sam Darnold, but I do see some logic in it. He looked much better last season with the Vikings, and if he came to the Raiders, the combination of coaches like Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll might be able to mold him into the quarterback they want. It's similar to what happened with Geno Smith, and truth be told, Darnold might even have more raw talent than Smith. That said, I hesitate to commit $35 million per year to Darnold because it would mean losing key players like insert player C and insert player Murr. The team might also miss out on keeping other important contributors. However, if the Raiders did go this route, they would still have the 6th overall pick to improve the roster. They could select a top defensive prospect like James Pierce Jr. or Abdul Carter to play opposite Maxx Crosby, strengthening the defense. With Christian Wilkins already under contract, this could be a viable path forward. Another option that I don't dislike is signing Jacoby Brissett or Justin Fields as bridge quarterbacks while drafting a rookie to develop. The Raiders could even take a quarterback with the 6th overall pick if they wanted to. Personally, I'd rank this option as my 3rd choice, behind signing Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson first and then considering Sam Darnold. Speaking of overlooked quarterbacks, I wouldn't be completely opposed to bringing in someone like Joshua Dobbs. I know some people don't take him seriously as a starting quarterback, but he's only 27 years old, and we've seen other QBs turn their careers around in the right system. Remember, there was a time when people thought Geno Smith was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, yet he revived his career. The same was said about Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, and both have since earned legitimate starting opportunities. Dobbs has never had a true chance to start and develop, so we don't even know what he could be with the right coaching and scheme. I've spoken to people who believe he has starting potential, and if given the right opportunity, he might prove himself. It wouldn't surprise me if, at some point, Dobbs gets a real shot at leading a team. As for the least popular option, sticking with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew as full-time starters, only received 7.9% of the vote from a poll of 3,000 people. That's just about 265 votes. It's understandable why most fans don't see that as the best path forward. If I removed Gardner Minshew from the equation, I wonder if that 7.9% vote share would have increased slightly. Still, I completely understand why most fans don't want to roll with Aiden O'Connell or Minshew as the Raiders' starting quarterback. To me, Aiden O'Connell simply isn't a starting caliber quarterback. He lacks the ability to create plays under pressure, which is crucial in today's NFL. We saw Patrick Mahomes struggle against the Eagles' defensive front in the Super Bowl, and that's Mahomes, who can move around and extend plays. Now, imagine a quarterback who doesn't have that mobility. You have virtually no shot at winning a Super Bowl if you run into an elite defensive line and don't have a quarterback who can evade pressure. While not every team has that type of pass rush, the reality is that the Raiders need to bring in a quarterback who can make plays outside the pocket when necessary. Some people have even suggested bringing back Derek Carr. While I'm not completely against it, I also don't see him as the ideal solution for the Raiders moving forward. If the team is going to go the veteran quarterback route, it needs to be someone who has won at the highest level, someone like Aaron Rodgers, who has playoff experience and a Super Bowl ring. If the Raiders go all in for just one season, it has to be with a quarterback who has proven he can win big games. Alternatively, the team could target a younger quarterback with long-term upside, someone in the 26 to 27 age range, like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, or Justin Fields. These guys still have potential to develop and improve, making them more viable options than aging quarterbacks with limited upside. The worst move the Raiders could make right now would be to bring in a quarterback who is clearly past his prime. Players like Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, and Ryan Tannehill don't make sense for a team looking to build for the future. None of these quarterbacks have proven they can consistently win the biggest games, and bringing in a mid-tier veteran just to fill a temporary gap would only delay the inevitable need for a real franchise quarterback. In the end, the Raiders should either go after a proven winner or take a shot on a young quarterback with significant potential. Getting stuck in between, signing an aging, average quarterback, would be the worst possible outcome. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Give this post a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time with another video.